Today on the show, the World Cup is fucking over. It's over, never to return for at least 3 years and 11 months, perhaps 10. And with maybe every single country in the entire Earth, maybe more. Maybe we'll get some interstellar ones as well. But for now, the World Cup is kaput. It's over. We are going to do our very last episode covering the tournament this summer. We're going to be talking about some takeaways, some lessons learned, the future of football and international football specifically. We're going to be talking about the expanded tournament. We're going to be talking about the awards. We're going to be giving out our very own James Rodriguez Award, originated on this podcast. We're going to be talking about some superlatives from the tournament and do a re-ranking of all the teams post World Cup. That's all coming up on our very final World Cup podcast. Live from San Jose, California and Brooklyn, New York, it is the Any Given Thursday podcast. We are 2 days out from Spain winning the World Cup, and it's been a long road here. I think this is the 23rd or 4th podcast we've done since the start of June, in not quite 7 weeks time. That's rather a lot, as well as a bunch of social media stuff. Thank you if you've picked us up in that time or are a continued listener. Appreciate that. We're going to be going back to our regularly scheduled Europa Conference League programming coming up next month. So, if that's not something you followed before, give us a chance. Let us woo you. Right, David?
Oh, yeah. It's a great time to follow these competitions. You learn about all these small teams, some events in the sport that you never thought you'd see happen on a pitch will happen in the Conference League.
To celebrate the end of our World Cup journey here, I've cracked a beer. Here's my first sip. That was nice. That was tasty. First fun fact, first beer I've had since the start of the World Cup. I went dry.
Whoa. Look at you go.
It's not true. It is the first beer I've had since Sunday though. It was I had a few on the day of the final. Sue me, okay? Sue me. I'm having a celebratory beer because it's our last podcast of the World Cup, our last podcast of the month. I'm going to be taking a little holiday after this for a week. I'm going to be on vacation, so you won't be hearing from me. And then we'll, as I said, be back to our usual fare with maybe a few, sprinkles and twists for your listening and viewing pleasure, but yet to be revealed. For now, though, David, how are you feeling now that our World Cup journey has come to an end? What are your emotions?
I don't know what to do with myself. I have to
It's
go to
weird.
my job and actually do work and not just watch the World Cup while I pretend to do work. I don't really know how to balance this.
I know it's a big absence.
Yeah, it is. It feels like something's missing. But with the return of European competitions, I'm going to have something to go to.
I always go through a little bit of a mourning period after a big international tournament because it's my favorite. It's my favorite soccer is the international stuff. I get very wrapped up in the spectacle of it and the journey of it. It's like you live in your own little time bubble, and then it suddenly bursts, and you have to go back to your same stupid club that fucks up all the time. And it's like, I mean, now you're just trading one sorts of politics for another. But before when it felt a little, I mean, FIFA was always bullshit, but it felt like a little bit more of a pure form, and it is with players representing their country. You're free of some of the like Fabrizio Romano transfer bullshit constantly, even though that filters in anyway. Just feels like a simpler thing sometimes, at least when you're watching the games and experiencing the motions. Going back to the many mechanisms and complications of club football always takes me like a few weeks of adjustment before I'm really enjoying it again.
Yeah, when I first learned that you get paid for your international appearances, and it's not just like, oh, they comp travel and hotels and training and stuff. Like growing up, I always thought it was just like, oh, you get a per diem. And now I learned that these
Yeah.
guys have like actual direct salaries from the national teams. Blew my mind when I learned that.
And they play the club and they compensate the clubs for inconvenience or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
like, so what do they ever bitch about then? But why don't we start off with a little reflection on the state of international football, perhaps what's coming in the future here in the rest of the decade, let's say. And I think the story has to be the potential extended dominance incoming from Spain and France specifically. I feel like my big question after watching, like, France kind of went out with a whimper in the semis, but before that looked pretty much untouchable by anyone but Spain. And then, of course, Spain essentially eased their way to the trophy here. So, how do other people keep up? It seems like all the coaches are Spanish in Europe right now, mostly Basque. There's literally four Basque coaches at the top of the Premier League right now: Arteta, Emery, Iraola, now Xabi Alonso. Not to mention, you know, Pep and Enrique are not Basque, but they are obviously Spanish, and Pep has this huge outsized influence on the century so far. Luis
Mhm.
Enrique is dominating the Champions League right now. Uh, and then France is just, as you said on the last podcast, 99 players in the World Cup born in France. They just have these two pipelines for talent development right now and organization that how does anyone compete with that in the next few years, the next 10 years?
Yeah, it's hard to visualize how you do. It's the pipeline of development and then the access that those players have to actually playing competitive football as young players is something you don't really see necessarily in other countries that are big and have these top leagues that are doing well at a youth level. Thinking England and Italy here, where a lot of players look really great at 18, 19, but then get stifled as they try to break through in the first teams. But Spain and France are really committed as leagues to developing younger players and giving them opportunities that you don't see throughout the globe. That being said, I feel like we've kind of been in this position with a lot of national teams in the past where you have a group of young players and it looks like, oh, well, they're set to dominate for the rest of history. I mean, you can point to France in the early and mid 90s as another example of this, where they look like they're going to be just unstoppable in the future, but there's always enough competition that it makes it difficult to maintain these kind of cycles. The longest I think we've really seen is in modern history, so excluding like Brazil of the 50s, is probably Spain in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and even then, it's only 6 years that they're really at their peak. So I don't know if we have enough of a history of teams actually maintaining this level of dominance to say that they will.
This may be a gross oversimplification, but maybe an interesting topic. Do you think the Premier League is actually bad for, say, like English international football because of, as you mentioned, that pipeline? Like, they're producing talent level at this moment at not that far off a place from Spain and France, even. Like the young players we've seen coming up who are between the ages of like 18 and 26, especially on the attacking, especially in that like 10 or winger role, which they have such an overabundance of. But then you see guys like Phil Foden, who should be a superstar, like a perennial superstar, but seems to spend his career so far being a superstar 1 year and then having an off year, and then being a superstar and then having an off year. This time his off year caused him to miss the World Cup. Cole Palmer dealt with injuries and stuff, but I mean, you'd be shocked a year ago to say Cole Palmer is not on the World Cup team. And like somebody like even like Saka, who had a good season and won the title and played in the Champions League final, I feel like his goal and assist numbers were like pretty low, and didn't show out until the third place game. Really, they have a lot of stars that I wonder if they played in other countries, like Kane and Jude. Is it less toll on their bodies over the course of a season because they're in leagues where they have to, they'll dominate more easily because they're playing at Bayern and Real Madrid? Is that simple, or is it like a league thing where the English pyramid sort of stifles the the growth of stars on a consistent level?
I think it definitely raises the floor. I mean, because you compare this England team to where they had been over the last 50, 60 years since the 1966 World Cup. It was a team that missed Euros in the past, right? So the floor right now is really
And
high for
lost to
what it
Iceland.
should. Yeah. Uh, this is a team that is always going to be among the favorites now, I think, for World Cups, right? Because the base level of talent is going to be high because all these teams in England have so much money to put toward developing players for selling them on, really, is because they're mostly geared toward making money now rather than actually competing. But that's a topic for a different day. Um, they have so much money and coaching and development opportunities for these players. But I do think there's something to like the inability to consistently find game time for some of their potential stars because they're at these top clubs where they're also bringing in
They're
great players
churning
from.
through guys. They're
Yeah.
churning through guys. Chelsea is the perfect example of this. Chelsea
Mhm.
keeps buying, like they accumulate young English talent, and then if they don't hit the ground running, then your window closes to make an impact at the club, and then maybe you're fucking loaned out, and the the cycle continues.
Right.
Chelsea
You
is
compare that
obviously the
to.
biggest problem
Mhm.
in Chelsea is still like sort of breaking. They haven't shattered the entire system like people were worried about when they took when those owners took over, when Blue Group took over, Blue Co, whatever the fuck. But they are slowly draining life force from it in a way that nobody else has really done
Yeah.
to this degree.
And I mean, you look at Manchester City's transfer windows over the last few years. You bring in a guy like Gianni Reinders for huge money. Any other club
Elliot
you bring
Anderson,
in, yeah,
120 million.
exactly what I was going to say, right? Any other club you bring in Reinders, that's your midfield starter for 3 years minimum because of the money you've invested in him. You're going to give him the opportunities. Now they're already moving on to other targets at twice the cost, and
But the thing is, if Elliot Anderson, little different with like a Florian Wirtz, say, because they Liverpool isn't quite the same. I mean, they spent a shit ton of money the last year, obviously, but they have to balance the books a little more. But like, if Elliot Anderson has like a bad first half of the season, he might get kicked down the pecking order, and like he's good enough that he will, I'm sure, have an illustrious career there. But Pep's gone. There's going to be some like there might be some growing pains. I wouldn't be surprised if in January everyone's like, "What's wrong with Elliot Anderson? 120 million player." Kind of like what we saw with Verts this year, where you're just like,
but at
maybe the
this
team is a little bit of a mess, and maybe give him some fucking time. You know?
yeah. But at the same time in England, you can fall down the pyramid a little bit and still have the competitiveness necessary to develop. Where if you I'll take Italians since they missed the World Cup. If you take an Italian youth player who is coming through at a bigger club, doesn't quite make the cut at 2021, if he moves to Serie B, that's not the same level as the championship. And I think that's kind of the big
Yeah.
difference with creating this base amount of talent is that if you're playing in the championship, you're still getting a lot of really good development against some pretty top level players. And you compare that to the second tier of every other nation, and that's just not going to be the same, which is kind of where I think France benefits from their league not being as good as the other top leagues. Is that, and the players who grow up in France are so willing to go to other countries to try, right? So you can go to Italy or England or Germany as a Frenchman, and if it doesn't work out, you can come back to a pretty competitive Ligue 1, and they're going to have an opportunity for you. And that maybe doesn't exist in like Germany and Italy, where players are less likely to want to go abroad. And then you don't have as many opportunities for domestic players to develop at a high level.
Not just that, but going that much diversity in where in leagues players are playing in just
Mhm.
offers the chance for different styles of play and different cultural learnings in the game. Like I don't it's not totally lost on me that Jude Bellingham developed in Germany and now plays in Spain. And he is the one on the English team that expresses himself entirely differently, both like on the ball and personality wise. Like he's very un-English in in a lot of his style. And I don't think that's a coincidence that he would rather be playing for Real Madrid than like Manchester United or whatever,
Mhm.
or Manchester City, I guess, is
Yeah.
the better, or Arsenal. I think that's not a coincidence. But anyway, I digress. Let's return here to the international side where I think a brief check in on South America. They've had a weird century since the '02 Brazil win. Argentina was their only finalist prior to 2022 in that stretch, in including four tournaments, I think. where Brazil, hasn't been past the quarterfinals except in 2014 when they were humiliated by Germany at home, and Argentina was unable to get over the hump in that next round in the final. So 2022 felt like okay, South America's like back a little bit, but now post that performance in the final and Messi riding off into the sunset, sort of, I wonder what it looks like for the continent because there are many questions. Argentina still looks like the best team by far to me in CONMEBOL, Messi or not,
Hmm.
but they'll need to do some rejiggering and some restructuring of what the team looks like going forward. Brazil is at yet another crossroads, right? Uruguay just crashed out spectacularly and have no direction. Colombia seemed like they're in really steady good shape, but then underperformed. Ecuador similarly underperformed. Paraguay reliable, will always be Paraguay. Bolivia, will always be Bolivia. Chile and Peru are absolute disasters. And 10
Hmm.
years ago were really, really talented squads who made World Cups, and Chile even won Copa Americas. So where do we go from here? Is this just like chill out and in 4 years, Colombia is still going to be good, Ecuador is still going to be good, Brazil will probably have figured something out, Argentina will still be good. Am I overreacting to thinking this is a little bit of a crossroads for some of these teams and
I don't
federations
think it
here?
is. I don't think it is an overreaction because when you look at, I think the growth of the game in Africa and North America in particular, it's
Africa had a
taking
great
away.
tournament.
Mhm. It's kind of
Well,
showing that like
mostly.
it's not just a finances issue with South America, right? Like it's not just a little come and go as like some of the teams get a little wealthier and reinvest or whatever. There's legitimate concerns about one, national teams, but two, also I think we were just talking about the leagues in Europe. I think there's concerns about the leagues in South America as, the Saudi league is getting stronger, the leagues in North America are getting stronger, and a lot of them are targeting South American players to come in and fill out their rosters, which is taking away players from these leagues that could help, raise the competitiveness of it, get some strong development domestically, moving over to countries who don't have any reason to focus on the development of their foreign players, right? It doesn't serve the Saudi national team or the Saudi league to necessarily develop a Brazilian they bring over at 23 and give him opportunities if there's a guy from another country that can do that same job. So I think that is one issue. And then as the sport gets richer and richer, I think it's just like Europeans have more finances to throw at problems and to throw at their teams.
There is a little bit of an identity thing too, where there's that fun conspiracy about Protestantism ruining
Mhm.
Brazilian football, and but which is whatever. But the wider context, more what you're talking about, of what exactly are these leagues looking like going forward? What are the development tracks in the country? There was that all that drama a few years ago with Argentina where they how they typically would take like rural boys from their families in more provincial areas, like put them in these barracks where they just like play football all day and they have horrible conditions and a lot of them were sexually abused by adult men, and that's not really a sustainable method of talent development. And we see like in Uruguay, where we are talking about how they do have a ton of talent, but it's an imbalanced squad. I think that's the countries that have the more stable identities right now are like the Colombias and the Ecuadors, who they didn't hit the heights they maybe wanted in the end at the World Cup, but they're able to put together really sustained squads with not just elite level talent, but sort of a balance and style. And so I wonder if like Colombia is in the best shape of any of these nations other than Argentina because they just have a huge amount of talent right now. But
Yeah, I kind of agree with you that Colombia is probably the second, looking like potentially the second best team for a while in South
I mean, I'm sure
America.
Brazil's still going to be
So
good.
yeah,
Like that's
still
we're not talking
under
like a
some
team like
talent. Yeah. But I do also wonder if, like you were saying, the manner in which players are developed nowadays is impacting this because South American, their relationship with the sport has always been so much more. like emotional and bordering on the spiritual almost with the way that like the Pibe tradition in Argentina, right? Of and that connection with Maradona and then Messi, and like you're not going to get players like that anymore because you're if you're 11 and you're still playing on the street, then they've already decided you're not good enough because you're not tucked away at one of these academies developing this rigid system. And I think that has an impact on the development when it's so converse with the culture and the history of the sport in those countries. And it probably drives away a lot of the passion and the joy that players have growing up. I
Are you
think
blaming globalization for the destruction of our
a
sport?
little bit. A little bit. If you've read Roberto Baggio's like 900-page dissertation on why Italian
I have
football is
not.
struggling, I didn't think you had. But he talks about that with Italians as well, and like they don't love the game the way they used to because everybody that's professionalized has had that joy beaten out of them as a teenager because it's just constantly developing and it's all about the technique and it's not about being able to express yourself. And I think you, in order to succeed nowadays, your culture around the game kind of has to fit this modern development. I think that's why, like, part of the reason Spain and England have been so good recently is because their cultures around the sport are so aligned with this current style and system.
That's a good transition to the United States of America, where we often beat the talent and joy out of our younglings in the sport. But I want to briefly ask you about the USA and Mexico to close off this section, which is like they both made the round of 16. I think they both in hindsight they both hit the level they should have hoped to. Like this was like if they didn't make the round of 16 and win a knockout game, I think they both would have been bitterly disappointed and maybe embarrassed. US obviously performed a lot worse in their matchup than Mexico did, but there were some outside circumstances that seem to have had an effect on them. But they did show something before that was positive to build on. We don't know about the future of their coaching situation with Pochettino. We do know about Mexico's next step in Mascherano taking over, which is interesting.
Mhm.
I wonder what what we can expect from them in the next couple of cycles. They don't have a major tournament until the next World Cup. They have the Gold Cup, but they don't play in the Conan Bowl. Uh,
The upcoming
you know,
Copas. Yeah.
yes, in 2 years. So what do we expect from them in this next cycle?
Yeah. Mexico always feels like they're like 2 to 4 years away from being a great team. I don't know if there's any time I've left the World Cup
Also,
being
sorry,
like,
I just realized I said Mascherano. I was still thinking about Argentina. Apparently, I meant
yeah,
Rafa Marquez. Sorry,
okay.
misspoke.
Yeah.
It just came to me. Don't at me.
Yeah. Um, I was gonna say with Mexico, it feels like every time I watch a World Cup with Mexico, I'm like, oh, they're 2 to 4 years away from really taking the next step, but they never actually do. They're always this perennial like round of 16, good, tough opponent to get past, but they never actually make the run. And so I don't really know where they go because they I look at this squad and there's a decent amount of young players that should be developing well, but will probably become solid contributors that aren't world superstars because that just seems to be like what happens to
I mean,
Mexican
is
players
this a
when they go to
Liga
Europe.
MX problem?
To an extent, right? Like it has to be. The league's
I mean,
solid,
it's
but it's
tough
not
because they
great.
have it's solid. They have a healthy financial situation, so a lot of players stay because they can pay salaries that other synonymous leagues maybe wouldn't.
Mhm.
So they don't not as incentivized to move across the world,
Yeah.
and which is good and bad, I guess. The weird thing about Mexico is that they never seem to have a project. The US the last 2 years was like a project. Pochettino came in like a club coach from Europe, like he is, even though he's Argentine, and instituted this like 2 year plan to get them where they were. And okay, they didn't actually go further than Mexico in the tournament. My own point taken there. But that was something. And Canada has this project, right?
Mhm.
With Jesse Marsh. And Mexico's always seemingly like putting out fires from the previous attempt to install something, and there's never any consistency. Aguirre did an amazing job coming in and just being like Papa figure and just
Mhm.
calming everything down, getting everybody united and playing in a way that the fans could be proud of. But Aguirre was, a firefighter. He wasn't there to install the next cycle. That's going to be Marquez's job. I wonder if having somebody who played in Europe as long as he did, who's young and fresh faced and has these ties to this stuff that just won the World Cup. I wonder if there's something in that, like if that's part of it, and if he's able to overcome the politics in the federation, which is so numerous.
Yeah, it feels like Mexico should have a lot of hope right now. My concern, though, is Liga MX is getting rid of Pro Rel, and I just don't
Which they
like that.
barely had to begin with, dude.
Yeah, well, the last few years have been,
Yeah.
yeah, it was like, oh, your average points over 3 years, excluding if you're a big team, we'll just exclude some random games because we don't want you to go down. Stuff like that. It was not a real system over there for the last few years, but now it's fully gone, and I wonder how that's going to impact player development. I also, speaking on the US, Americans have this idea, right, that if soccer was the most popular sport here, we would dominate the world.
Ugh, so tired
And
of hearing this. This is
I'm
not this is people that don't watch soccer that say this, for the record.
yes.
For all you
Well,
non-Americans listening.
I'm also like, can we look at other sports for examples? Who won the World Baseball Classic?
Yeah, not us.
Not us.
We're in the
I
final
actually
though.
don't I actually don't
Yeah.
remember who won. Was it Venezuela?
It was Venezuela.
Venezuela?
Beat the US
Yeah.
in the final.
Much smaller country, nowhere near the finances of the US, and they beat
No shit.
us at our own national pastime.
We
Who are
kidnapped
the
their
best
president last year.
who are the
He's a bad
best
guy, but we still did it.
yeah. Who are the best basketball players in the world right now? You got a Canadian, you got a Greek guy, you got a Serbian. You don't have an American at the top.
Frenchman.
A Frenchman, yeah. Like other countries, when they get interested in American sports, they start
Slovenian.
pumping out talent, right? At a rate that we do, but we're not as far ahead of the rest of the world athletically as we have this notion that we are. It's mostly just a numbers game as to why we dominate at the Olympics.
Yeah, we
And
have a lot of
it's
people.
mostly a numbers game as to why we're ahead in the NBA. And we're not ahead in other sports. It's not as big an advantage as we like to think we have. So I really, even if it was the number one sport in the country, I think there's still serious issues with our current system in developing players, right?
Yeah. I think it's
The
more
pay to
about
play
that
thing.
than that popularity.
Yeah,
Right? Like
absolutely. It's so much easier for kids growing up in Western Europe to have access to, you know, academies and to develop and play the sport at a high level than it is for Americans. One, you need to be close to a decent sized city in order to have any access to that in the US. If you grow up in rural Minnesota, you're not going to be connected to an academy. It's just not going to be there for you. The college system doesn't prioritize development at all. They don't care if you get better when you leave college. They want to win games. That's what it's about for them.
same with
The
club soccer growing up.
yeah, it's all about winning,
Same
winning,
thing.
winning. And so we just don't actually develop players because there's no reason to for the people involved.
You know what's
Uh,
funny is that this is kind of becoming a thing in other sports too. Like,
mhm.
not you mentioned that basketball. Like
AAU
AAU
culture
is not that
awful. It's
dissimilar. It's not that
terrible.
dissimilar. And I've heard even like guys like Raja Bell, who is in the media now, the Ringer, talking about how he's like took his kids out of the AAU system because the process is all wrong. And you could see like the Europe, some of the development that as you mentioned, that like five of the best, if not the best, five players in the league are all internationals now. And yeah, I think it's not an accident. And it's just hard when you don't have, we're making it hard. We're also making it harder in general for kids that don't have grow up in wealthy families to participate in these things, like across the board. We're making education worse also.
Yeah.
Then not to go full, New York Democratic Socialist on you, but these are things that are happening. So we're only gonna lose more in the long term against these richer countries even, that have more
Look
limited
at
populations and systems in place.
look at who's on our national team, right? Christian Pulisic is
Internationals. I
well,
was
yeah.
gonna say people who aren't even from
Some
here.
of them- yeah.
Balogun's just
Um,
straight up English.
Yeah. Serginho Dest, straight up Dutch. You know,
Well,
like
at least he has like an American parent, right?
one of
Doesn't
them.
he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tim Weah's dad is one of the greatest football players of all time. Christian Pulisic's dad was a professional. Jordan Reyna's dad, professional. Alex Freeman's dad was a star
Professional
athlete in a
asshole.
different sport. Yeah. um,
Got him.
a lot of these guys are not being developed in the way that other kids in our country have to be developed because they have access either to academies in Europe or to fathers who were professional athletes and can either throw a ton of money at things or can provide direct coaching that other kids in the country don't have. And yeah, I think the general development in our country right now is really, really poor. And I think the MLS does not do anything to really address that. I also am so sick and tired of people pushing American players to go to Europe right away because we need a strong domestic league to develop players in. And so if we push them all out the door right away, then we won't have anybody else developing our country. But I think we've probably stuck on this point enough.
Yeah, we've exhausted that topic. Let's move on to another fun one, which is discussing the pros and cons of the 48 team tournament. Obviously, some of them seem pretty obvious, I guess, but now that there's talk of going to 64, which would be just an abomination and literally impossible to cover, I already felt trying to keep up with all the games in this edition as someone that had to host a podcast about it. Found it exhausting and like needed a break partway through just because it's so much content and soccer flooding in at all times. You're having as many as 5 games a day. It's at one point during the group stage, and I'm like, I don't know. I found it. It's both like deeply exciting when there every day something new is happening, but also a bit overwhelming. And it
Mhm.
sort of was fit with the whole vibe of it being a whole continent and like the spread out, the United States especially, and all the different pocket and how different cities are across the country and everything. But as a sustainable football product, if we go above 48, I'd be concerned.
Yeah, I think the one benefit to expansion is it gets rid of these stupid third place teams going through, which I hate. I hate it so much. Uh, because 64 you can cut down in half to 32 nicely, and that works. And
But
for
64
context,
basically eliminating competitive group stages altogether is
yeah,
essentially what's happening.
that's the trade-off, which is
Like we were worried that was
I'd
going to
rather
happen
this, I think.
here, and then we had a little bit better depth in areas than we thought, which is what we
Mhm.
should talk about as a pro, right? We
Yeah,
got
yeah.
some
There's
fun
some
stories
small
and fun
nations, but
countries that really played well.
Curacao, Cabo Verde, I think those are great stories.
DR
It's a
Congo.
little, yeah, a little set off by I think like the Tunisias and Iraqs who had just were completely uncompetitive in
Well,
their group stage
Tunisia
games.
would have qualified probably. I mean, Tunisia
I,
just qualify for
yeah,
World Cups. That's what they do.
yeah, I agree. I'm pretty sure Tunisia would have qualified either way, but yeah, going to 64, you're gonna have more teams like Tunisia and Iraq, especially because it's going to be mostly teams from Asia because that's where there's a lot of countries that you can pull from, right? Like you can't pull really any more teams from Common Bowl, or you're just saying
Well,
they're
yeah, I
all
was
going to
gonna
the World
say
Cup.
at a certain point they have to stop having a qualifying. They just all go.
Yeah. I
We're gonna
think
have
we've
French
kind of,
Guiana.
yeah. And outside of, I think UEFA and Africa have more teams that you could add to the World Cup and they could still be competitive, right? Like Nigeria can be competitive. Sweden,
Cameroon.
one of the Cameroon would be competitive at this World Cup. Sweden was one of the worst teams in UEFA qualifying. They had absolutely no right to be at the World Cup based on how they played, but they're still like a solid team, right? I think Europe and uh,
They have good
Africa have
players.
more talent to send out. But that's not where we're going to pull these teams from. They're going to come from Asia so that we can get more Middle East teams in and more of these high wealth countries. And I feel like it's probably also going to come from CONCACAF because you kind of have to. And I think with these continents, we've reached the point where there's just not enough quality teams to send anymore. Right? If we add 4 more Asian teams in the hope of potentially getting a China or an India to qualify, they're going to get slaughtered. it's not going to be a competitive game. And it's, so as much as I want to highlight the smaller countries and be like, look at the progress they've made and how great it was to watch Curacao and Cabo Verde, they still need to earn the right to go to the World Cup, or it's not going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, and it's some of the accomplishment of Curacao, topping Jamaica in a group goes away because they're both there at the tournament, and
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
stakes are lowered. And we saw what it's for. We did spotlights. If you're interested in Uzbekistan and Jordan in the Asian Federation, and they've spent Uzbekistan in particular a very long time building a project that could eventually get them to this point, and they still can't come close to winning or even drawing a game because it's just a big level to get up to. And they have good talent development. They'll probably get there eventually, but took long, dedicated progress to get to this point, and there's still a lot of room to grow. So just throwing other teams in there, you're just not gonna. We talk about Cabo Verde and DR Congo. Africa's just different. They have those players are playing all over Europe, even if one of them's from on Shamrock Rovers. DR Congo seemed like an underdog at the time, but if you actually look up and down their roster, they're chock full of talent. They're a very talented team and have a lot of
Yeah.
household names, especially in European leagues, who just are it's a much different situation where you have like one guy playing at Manchester City and everybody else in Asia, Not to
Mhm.
disrespect those leagues. That's just
No, but there's I think a big fall off in Asia after you get through the top 4 or 5 teams, right? Like your Iran, Japan, Korea, and I think now you can probably throw Saudi Arabia in there as like, and Australia. Saudi Arabia will probably be consistently a solid team now with the money they've invested in the sport. But I do want to say, like, Jordan would have qualified for a 32 team World Cup based on
yeah,
what they
they
did
earned
in
it.
qualifiers. They would have earned it. And if you just qualify because of the expanded tournament, it doesn't feel the same.
Special, as
Um,
special.
yeah, but at least it would get rid of third place teams because they went 1-8 in the first knockout round. They just shouldn't. You've already lost. Like if you're a third place team, you shouldn't be going through. I hate it. Um, Part of the reason I really dislike 48 as a number.
Yeah, it's weird. And Africa benefited from some of that, but I do want to shout out Africa overall, though. Other than Tunisia, 7 of their 8 teams did qualify. Morocco went to the quarterfinals, Egypt to the round of 16, and gave Argentina a famous scare. Got Ivory Coast was super legitimate, but just ran into a even better Norway. DR Congo and Cabo Verde obviously were huge stories and like lost in the most admirable possible way lost in the most admirable fashion possible,
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
passable fashion. And it was really only like Senegal made the round of 32, even though they, kind of sucked most of the tournament. But like it was really only Tunisia and then sucking, and then South Africa and Ghana being not super watchable. I think it's fair to say, but they
I
did
was
also qualify.
really, I do want to say, I was really impressed by how South Africa responded from the first game
Yeah,
because they looked like they did not belong at the World Cup in that
no,
first game, and to bounce back and get through the groups and be generally competitive was really impressive.
it was a testament to the will and spirit of the team more so than the technical quality necessarily, because they were really not good in that Canada game. But why don't we move on to more fun, quicker hits here? Let's
Mhm.
start with the FIFA awards, David. You're gonna run through these.
Yeah,
I'm gonna tell
just
you
list
whether
them
they were
out.
deserving of the award.
Yeah. So Rodri won the Golden Ball for best player at the tournament. What are your thoughts on that?
Deserved.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of hard to argue best player on the team that won. I feel like
Could
there's
have given
other
it to
players that,
Messi.
yeah, other guys had a shout for it, but he's definitely a deserving award winner.
I don't think
Young
Messi
player,
needs another golden ball
no,
for a World
no,
Cup final loss. He's already done that in
yeah,
2014. That was like all the memes of him being so sad getting it.
yeah.
Let's not make him go through that again.
Young player of the tournament was Pau Cubarsi, Spanish center back.
This one's tough because I have my mind so wrapped in our next segment, which is our James Rodriguez Award,
Mhm.
and which includes the specifications of who's too famous to be included. So
Yeah.
it's weird for me to try to like reimagine all the young people we left out now. I think it's fair because he played all their minutes and he's a 19-year-old and he just won the World Cup with the team that conceded one goal. So why not? Sure. Fair. Deserved.
Yeah, I think he was pretty great in the tournament. Golden Glove Award went to Unai Simon.
So I guess you can't really argue that because it's isn't it based on I guess you can't
Yeah, I
argue it.
think it's
Was he the best keeper? No.
mhm.
But he didn't
Yeah,
have to
I
be.
think it's a statistically based
Yeah,
award.
I
So
think
it
thought so too.
does, yeah, it does, make it pretty easy to say, well, it has to go to him. And I feel
Was he
like
the best keeper? No.
I agree. But it feels like it's deserving because of how good the defense was as a whole for them. But yeah, it doesn't feel like he was necessarily the best keeper.
Who was
Sorry,
the
let
best
me look.
keeper?
I mean, I think Vozinha's in with a shout. Orlando Gil from Paraguay has to be in with a shout as well. Emi Martinez was pretty good for most of it, but he had some bad moments along there as well. Um, Diogo Costa was under a lot of pressure
Diogo
and
Costa
made
had a great
some really
tournament.
good saves.
His
Yeah.
shot stopping was elite. Yeah. That's a good
So I
shout.
would say those those are the other names that I would put up in the conversation. But Unai Simon he's in the conversation, even if you're saying just best goalkeeper. But I agree, he probably doesn't win it for me.
Yeah,
Okay.
there wasn't a defining goalkeeper at the top echelon of teams, which there usually is, I feel like. It was obviously Emmy in 22. I just feel like
Mhm.
there's usually like somebody that really stands out and I feel like a lot of it was mixed for a lot of those teams.
I feel like Vozinha was the big standout, but
He
the
was the big
complication there
story.
is they go out in the round of 32. He's it's more about the story, which was incredible. And
Yeah.
his save percentage is like 90% or something.
Yeah, it was
He was
good.
actually very good, but it's hard to compare him to the guys who went deep in the competition.
Yeah.
Um, Golden Ball for the top, or Golden Boot, sorry, for top goal scorer, that goes to Mbappe. Nothing you can really debate about this except should
Not
goals scored in the
deserved.
third place game count?
They should not. Definitively no.
Yeah.
They're
It's a big
they've been
advantage.
eliminated from advancing in the tournament. They should not count. And they was playing mostly backups.
Mhm.
And I thought it was kind of shabby for Deschamps to start him in the first place, and for him to stay on the entire game was a little bit lame. And I think if you think about the story of the tournament, as legendary as Mbappe was and is, and he will maintain, like he could have just fucking waited one tournament to take Messi's goal record. You know, come on. Like
Mhm.
this my memory of this tournament will be Messi in his twilight years carrying the entire offensive load at times for that Argentina side. It's not going to be Mbappe.
Yeah. Yeah. The brace putting him over the top in the third place game makes it feel a little undeserved, to put it
Take
lightly.
some of the
Because
sheen off of it. I think it's lame.
yeah, third place game always high scoring. Um, all right, so I guess that moves us on to our actual spotlight awards, the awards from the podcast. We're going to start with our big one, our James Rodriguez Award, which, if you're tuning in for the first time or seeing this on socials, this is an award that goes to a young player who has a breakout campaign at the World Cup. It does have the caveat that if you're already too well known, so players like Kubarsi and Yamal from Spain, you're ineligible for the award. You have to actually be using the World Cup as the platform for your breakout. Named after James Rodriguez, who had, was it 2010? He had the,
2014.
God, I get it wrong every time. I'm so mad at myself. Uh, 2014, he has his massive breakout tournament, gets his big move. So it's named after him. And last World Cup, we gave the award to Josko Gvardiol, who parlayed that performance into a move to Manchester City. So who's going to get it this time? I think we kind of came down to two names for the award.
Yeah,
Ilan
pretty obvious,
Manzambi,
I think, in the end.
Switzerland, and Bouadi from Morocco, two midfielders. And yeah, do you want to do the honors?
Yeah, I think this was really as tight as it gets because And I think what it came down to in my head was favoritism. No, I'm kidding. That probably played a part. But one player started the tournament really fast and kind of tailed out up at the end, and the other started slow, got his opportunity, and sort of changed how his team looked moving forward. And that's why the total 2026 any given Thursday James Rodriguez Award winner is Johan Manzambi of formerly of Freiburg, SC Freiburg, and starter in the Conference League final just a couple of months ago that we covered, and now I guess plays for Aston Villa, which is really the definition. It's the definition of this award happening in
Yeah.
real time because
Mhm.
we were the only motherfuckers talking about this guy 3 months ago, David. Well, we were all the podcasts were like, "Oh my god, Johan Manzambi's so fucking good." Go check our receipts in March and February. That's all we could talk about was Johan, and now all of a sudden he's like the hot topic. Just want people to know.
Manzambi getting the move to Aston Villa, I think, seals it for me because it exemplifies what the award's supposed to be about, right? It's a player parlaying the tournament performance into, into a level of stardom that he was not at before, and getting a huge move to Aston Villa, arguably an overpayment, is kind of, the sporting world telling us this is the right guy to choose. Buwadi, obviously great as well. A little bit more of a known quantity coming in, I think, with
That's I
Lille.
think what the real cutoff is for him is that
Yeah.
he was already gonna get people like City are floating around him now. That was already gonna happen before he turned 20, I think. And it just
Yeah.
so happened that he showed out. He was so good in their first few games that, like, at his age, having never really played for the team before, I think that, like, people were a little startled by how real it was so quickly. But he was already at such an advanced level that he was almost borderline. Should he be in this list at all? Uh,
Yeah.
but I think Bonzombie is more in the spirit of it because nobody was talking about him a year ago, or could even probably identify Freiburg on a map, frankly. So
Which is crazy because it's like a pretty solid team. And
yeah, they're in Europe like every year at this point.
yeah, but we do have a full team. So you might be expecting some names like Apal Kubarsi. He's already a starter at Barcelona. He's not going to be on this team. Vozinha obviously had a breakout tournament. He's 40. He's not going to be on this team. You have to be young. Our cutoff was like,
You have to be 22 by the
mm,
time the tournament ends. Still,
yeah. So
that's my rule. And how we
yeah,
pick if you're too famous is don't worry about it. It's our
it's
decision.
vibes.
We decide. We're the
Our
deciders.
our dividing line was basically Jan Diomande was kind of where we came down on. He was the borderline case. We decided he's a little too famous,
He was
so he
gonna
had
be
to
in the
be.
team, and then all the stuff like, well, it's either gonna be PSG or Liverpool, and this seemed to be decided pre-World Cup at the time, although it happened mid and hasn't even been finalized. But we were like, all right, we got to swap them out. It's too easy.
Yeah. So our James Rodriguez team of the tournament is in goal, Patrick Beach for Australia. Not a lot of young goalkeepers at this tournament, but he had a really good showing after surprising everybody by even getting the starting job. Um, our center
And he
backs, we
just
went with
moved
the.
to Troyes. He just got to move to
Oh,
Europe.
there we go. I didn't even catch that. I didn't
Sign
know
just
that
sign
happened.
just at Troyes.
Nice. We went with the 3-5-2. It's a real formation. Some guys are a little out of position. Our center backs are Alex Freeman, the American, recently moved to Villarreal, had a great tournament. Alessandro Circati, Australia and Parma, and Mbokazi, the South African, who had a terrible first game but really pulled it together as the tournament went on. In our midfield, we have the award winner himself, Yohan Manzambi, uh, Yernin Kie from Ghana. We have Christ Inai Ulai. Sorry, I probably mispronounced his last name there. From Ivory Coast, he just got a move to Fiorentina for $30 million. We have Buwadi of Morocco and Gilberto Mora, who I feel like he was just always going to find himself on this team somehow.
Yeah.
Our expectations around what he can do are at through the roof. I mean, this kid's going to be special. 17-year-old playing for his national team. And then up top, We went with Alabegovic from Bosnia and Irankunda from Australia. So it's a midfield heavy group. I feel like
It
that's
is.
kind of the big takeaway for me is just how many really good, promising midfielders there are right now.
Iran Kunda's like, you're isolating me in a 3-5-2 again. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
But that's a little Australia joke for you Socceroos out there. Well, one thing I enjoy about this list is how many were actually on our preseason or pre-tournament 11 picks. Alabegovic was on there. Monzambi and Boadi and Mora were all on there. We had, although we had a different Australian center back, we had Harrington,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah, I think
who was on the cutoff probably of honorable mentions here, but ended up not playing a ton. Had a really good showing in the Egypt game that he started. Of course, missed that penalty, but I'm giving him points for stepping up at all in that situation. It's crazy. He's 18, but so he had a decent showing. Um, Players that didn't play that we had on the list: Penders, the goalkeeper for Belgium, that made sense. We weren't really thinking Beach was an option, so we struggled to find a keeper. Says, the right back, Belgian, didn't really play. Fernandez Pardo, also Belgian, barely played up top. And then we replaced Diamande with Assane Diao, who also didn't play for Senegal.
yeah, he was a
Vuskovic, we
late
started.
call up as well. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was a late call up, and then the injury concerns were probably worse than we thought coming into this. So he didn't really
yeah.
have an opportunity.
We had the young center back Vuskovic, who actually Spurs just sold from Brighton via Hamburg, who was on loan there. The Croatian started the first game against the English, had a terrible game, and didn't really get back in the team after that. So he got
He had
hooked
kind of the
from our
anti
list.
James. Might be the anti
He
James award
did,
winner. His reputation went down
yeah.
a good bit from that one game, which is probably unfair to him. But
But we had at least four holdovers in the 11 from
Mhm.
our first attempt at pre tournament,
And
which isn't bad.
we argued a lot about Freeman as well, about
Yeah,
whether he would get the We were concerned whether he would actually get the starting job, which was kind of rumored before the tournament, but not a sealed deal. So went with Harrington instead, who we thought might get the start over Suter, who was maybe not healthy at the coming in, but yeah,
had a great tournament, Suter, except for
he
his
did. If
terrible
he was
penalty.
younger, he could win the award too. But he's
Yeah.
like 26.
We also had Malik Diouf as a left back. We had trouble with left back to begin with, which is helpful going into a three and instead. But Diouf played a little bit, but not very well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's welcome to our new entries: Patrick Beach, Irankunda, Freeman, Ulai, wherever else you said. What about that
Mhm.
guy? Did you say the Ghana guy, or is he on our honorable
Yeah.
mentions? Caleb
Yeah. I'm
Urenki, he made it. I
Yes,
missed
he
him.
got the start. I might have just
I missed him.
mispronounced his last name because I'm not good with that kind of thing.
Fine.
So
Fine. All right. Then we move
yes.
on. You've put together a nice little list of retroactive winners because obviously we've only
Mhm.
been doing this podcast since 2022. We
Yeah.
did give out the 2022 James Award as you mentioned, but you've come up with a little with a little list of past winners that you would have given it to.
Yeah, I went all the way back because I was kind of just having fun going through that, and it was
You're not
hard
allowed to do that.
because I'm not allowed to have fun. Damn, this
Yeah.
is a job.
You're
You're
a
right. I
lawyer.
shouldn't be having fun. Uh, uh,
You're a
it
fucking
was
lawyer,
easy
David.
with some of the more recent ones because I could actually remember, and be like, oh, this guy broke out this year, or like I remember like feeling like, wow, this is a superstar at the World Cup. Some of the older ones, they're a little more known probably coming in because I d- I don't know how unknown they were before the tournament, but we'll go backwards. So last tournament was Josko Bardiol, Croatian center back, Benjamin Pavard in 2018. I feel like that
Was he
one
that
was
young in 2018?
he was pretty young.
How
I think
old
he
is he
was
now?
22. He's still
Damn.
like
What happened to him? He's only
he went to
30?
Bayern and just kind of stuck around, not doing too much.
Wow. That's the
Um,
horror story of I mean, very James like, actually.
yeah. Who's our 2014 winner? James Rodriguez.
No shit.
Yeah. 2010, pre biting incident, I went with Luis Suarez, who
Was he
was
he wasn't on Liverpool yet? Was he still on
no, he was at
Ajax?
Ajax. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that then he counts.
And Pavard, he moved to
Pre-biting.
Bayern right after the World Cup as well. So
Mm,
that was part of what prompted that. 2006, Lucas Podolski. He was already at a big
that's a
club by
easy
that time,
easy
but
win though.
yeah, he wasn't a
Easy
starter
one.
for that team. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very
2002,
obvious one.
Landon Donovan came to mind, but I went with Park Ji-sung, who then parlayed that into eventually moving to Manchester United. Uh,
Good
1998 was
player.
another pretty easy one. It's Michael Owen. Uh,
Yeah.
was not a known quantity coming in, and arguably England's best player at a tournament with David Beckham on the team. So 1994, Oleg Salenko, who was somebody
Oh
that
shit.
I did not know before researching this award, Russian footballer. He scored 5 goals in a group stage game. So,
Wow.
yeah. So that earned it for me. And then, sorry, I went away from my list for 1 second. Then 1990, Toto Scalacci, the Italian. This was kind of his only big moment in his career. Was the 1990 World Cup.
That would be a
1986.
good podcast about
Hmm,
guys who were only famous because of a World Cup, like had a
yeah,
big tournament and then never parlayed it into anything. That would be a really good. We
we
should do
should
that
do that.
show
We'll put that on
before,
our
like,
list.
yeah, before like Libero steals it or something.
Yeah. 1986, I went with Enzo Schifo. You could argue Julio Cesar as well. 1982, kind of cheating because Argentines already knew who this guy was. Diego Maradona. It's kind of his coming out to the European world. He's only 21 at the time. 1978, 21-year-old Michel Platini. Is before he gets his move to Saint Etienne, where he would solidify himself as arguably the best player of the early 80s pre Maradona. Um, 1974, I'm going to butcher this guy's name. Władysław Zmuda, Polish player. Another guy who kind of, this is the 1974 World Cup is kind of his only really big moment. Um, he was only 20, I believe, at the time, and was like the star center back for a Polish team that had a lot of expectations coming in, and yeah, kind of was their big breakout star of that tournament. 1970, Teofilo Cubillas. Do you know who that is?
I have no idea what that is.
Okay, yeah, another guy. I had absolutely no idea who he was. Peruvian, um,
Oh,
and kind of shows my lack of knowledge because according to every place I've looked at, he's like widely considered the best Peruvian player of all time, and I had no idea who he
I
was.
should know that. Yeah.
Yeah, Pele selected him as for like the FIFA 100, and like pushed for him to be included on that list. Really great player. Played in the U.S. for a while as well in the old NASL. So
Cosmos.
19, no, the Fort Lauderdale Strikers.
Oh yeah, one of my
Yeah,
faves.
yeah. But he would move to Basel and then Porto not long after this World Cup. 1966, another really easy one is Jeff Hurst, who was a backup for England coming into the tournament and left as most people saying probably should have won the Golden Ball. 1962, Florian Albert. 1958, Pele. Or Just Fontaine. I think you could argue Just Fontaine. Never did anything else besides this World Cup, but top goal scorer. 1954, I cheated because I couldn't find a good answer. And I went with Luigi Franco Gemma, who was a little boy plucked from the crowd after a game because Turkey and Spain had gone even on all of the tiebreakers. So they had to draw lots. And so they blindfolded this child and had him draw lots. And he went on to be like a little mini celebrity in Italy. So really, I just wanted an excuse to share that story.
We should do that instead of goal difference.
Yeah, it makes more sense. It makes more
It does.
sense.
It's more fair.
Yeah. 1950, Oscar Miguez. He scores a hat trick against Bolivia in the playoff game for Uruguay, and then he has two late goals in the last 15 minutes against Sweden, which set up that famous Brazil Uruguay final
Yeah.
game.
They stunned the
So
nation. They stunned a
yeah,
nation into.
he's the only reason that was even possible. Um, then we go 1938. So Leonidas, kind of already a known quantity in Brazil, but really opened the eyes to Europeans of what like Brazilian jogo bonita and like flair was. 1934, I went with Giuseppe Meazza because he was already like a star in Italy, but I think you can argue he's the first global superstar in the sport. And it was largely off the back of this World Cup. The guy who the stadium for Inter and Milan is named after, so pretty turned himself into a pretty big superstar, I'd say. And then the first one is tough because it was a lot of older players on the teams
Because
that
you
did
don't know
well.
anything about 1930.
Well, I do a couple of the names. I could, and one of them is Luis Monti, who was excellent as well. I think he was, like he was a bit older, so I think Guillermo Stabile, based on my research, is the guy I would have given it to. He was pretty much unknown in Europe before this and was one of Uruguay's best players. So I think he gets the award.
Yeah, I'll allow that. Let's do a few superlatives then.
All
I'm going to
right.
say them and see if you agree or disagree.
Yeah.
Best game, I went with Argentina, Cabo Verde. Cabo Verde.
I think the England Mexico game has a shot here, but this is a
Agreed.
good choice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably my runner up for sure. Worst game, I went with Australia, Paraguay from the last round of the group stage, where neither team had any reason to score on the other. They just needed to
Yeah.
draw 0-0.
Yeah, that was a pretty rough watch. That's the right choice.
A lot of the Paraguay games were not great watches. Biggest upset, what do you know? It's Paraguay over Germany, though. I think that's the biggest one we had in the tournament that I could think of, like the biggest shock.
Yeah, especially in the knockouts. I think group
That
stage.
early, too.
Yeah, yeah, first knockout game, right? So
Yeah.
kind of set. I think that's the right one.
And Germany has to be the biggest disappointment then, right? Perhaps
Yeah.
Portugal. But Portugal
No,
did lose to the champions, so
and I think expectations around Portugal were very mixed coming in, whereas Germany, it was they're not a contender, but they'll be solid, and then to go out in the round of 32, definitely biggest. Brazil
I
could
don't
be in
know.
here as well,
Yeah, I think
but
Portugal were pretty higher up the people's consciousness of contenders than Germany were, but Germany lost in a worse fashion, so we're giving it to
yeah,
Germany. Best footballing story, obviously Cabo Verde, right? They drew both finalists over
mhm,
90 minutes. That's insane.
yeah, yeah. There's not even a competition. It's either Cabo Verde or picking out specifically Vozinha. It's so
Yeah.
basically the same thing.
Uh, Asia once again unfortunately wins worst federation showing.
Mhm.
I think no team advanced to the round of 16. Australia and Japan made it out of their groups, but that was it. Five of the nations finished last in their groups, which is hard to do. Yeah, it's not great.
Yeah, I
So
have
Asia,
the
I'm
full
sorry.
numbers. They Asian teams won 3 games, drew 10, and lost 16, and had a minus 41 goal difference.
Yikes.
Not
And it
great.
wasn't just like, debutantes like we mentioned. It was like South Korea having a
Hmm.
nightmare, total implosion. uh, team Japan got a little pretty unlucky with their draw. To be fair,
Yeah,
Australia can't get past the same level they get stuck at every tournament at this point. It seems like there was a lot of other factors going on, but some of it was, of course, that the new boys. Iran was like the unluckiest team ever, and
yeah.
like I mean there is some bad luck too.
Uh,
Part one of this one, best of the United States hosting. I think it was nice when I see videos of fans who are like, I'm actually surprised. Americans are quite nice. I think for the most part, everything I saw of actual people interacting with other actual people from around the world, that everybody got along and made for a nice time for one another.
yeah,
And reminded the rest of the world that we're not all the politics in the news, I
yeah,
thought it was nice.
yeah. I think you could throw Boston out there as the best host city. I feel like they did a really good job, even
I mean,
though
it was
getting
mostly just
out to
Scotland.
Foxborough sucks. Yeah,
Yeah.
But
Give the
and
city
Mexico
too much credit.
City was great as well, hosting, but that's not in the U.S., so we're not talking
Yeah,
about that right now.
I think the Canadian cities were great, but I think Kansas City um, was up there. Like it seemed like the people got on pretty well in Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington, which was interesting.
Yeah, it's just Dallas is a. I think they're used to hosting these kind of events
Yeah,
so that
thought
makes sense
Philly
to
did
me.
pretty well for themselves. Um, Even like the stuff like New York, it's just different in New York because it doesn't
Yeah.
you even that can't really take over the city. But the way people like flooding into Times Square to celebrate and met all kind of international people going around, that's a bit of fun. And now for the second part here, the worst of the United States hosting. Where do you begin? Literally anything politics. Trump getting in the Spain photo, calling in the favor for Balogun
Mhm.
that nobody wanted, all the visa stuff, all that bullshit that like humiliates us on an international stage. All of that
Yes.
was the worst of the tournament from our perspective.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, there's too many things to pick just one. I mean, the Iran situation is pretty unforgivable, unforgivable for a host nation.
Hmm. Bad, bad. Best TV coverage development. How's that for a pivot?
Sure.
One, Americans running over to Telemundo because it's better in every way. That was fun. That like 20% of their viewing audience were English speakers first. That's just great. That being said, I want to give Fox, I hate to do it, a tiny bit of credit for pivoting a little bit from the past World Cups they did because Qatar was so embarrassing for themselves and us as a sporting nation. It was like that bad of a broadcast, and it was particularly in the studio shows that were like quite literally unwatchable. Like they were so bad it was offensive to my ears and eyes. This time I thought they listened to some of the intense angry feedback they got all tournament. They decided they needed a little credibility. Who do you get? You go get Rebecca Lowe, who's been doing this for over a decade at NBC for the English leagues and is just true class and also is like a trusted voice and face for American soccer fans who have kind of grown up with the Premier League, especially those of us who are our age. So I think that was kind of a stroke of genius. Same thing could be said of Henri, who is not only like a personality people love from the CBS shows, but just has this aura of
Mhm.
of dignity and confidence about him that just brings an inherent respectability to any show he's on.
Which
Even
is
James
ironic
Corden.
because he had to cheat in order to make the World Cup that one time against Ireland.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. No.
True.
Yeah.
And the Zlatan is an extremely American move to throw him on the broadcast because he like fits right into that like American gunslinger kind of like studio host.
Mhm.
But it kind of worked with him and Thierry by the end. Him and Thierry and Rebecca by the end. I think they had like a threesome that ended up being kind of balanced because he could be kind of the zany zinger guy.
Yeah. And I was early on, I think he and Lawless were both kind of doing that because that's
Yeah,
typically Lawless's role as like the,
yeah.
ooh, I got zingers. And then I was an American hero for like a month during the 1994 World Cup. Um, but yeah, as we moved on through the tournament, Zlatan definitely took over more of that role. And
He
I
big
think,
dogged him.
yeah, he just was
He
basically like,
he shut
I'm better than
Alexi
you.
Lalas up. Lalas was still there, but you could feel over the course of time his voice getting pushed further and further to the side. I
Mhm.
thought that was really interesting. I feel like you could almost track it with airtime too. They started chipping him out more, and like the country clearly doesn't really like him. So there was something interesting happening there too, where he kind of got kicked off his own show a little bit.
A little bit. And yeah, I think Zlatan did a really good job fitting in with American TV. I would have liked a little more of the moments where you could see like the actual analysis from
Oh, of
Zlatan
course.
because when he did that, I think he's really good at it. And it's kind of similar to when Thierry Henry first got onto Paramount, where like he comes in, he's mostly saying one-liners as Jamie Carragher and Micah are doing more of the breakdowns, but you could see like, oh, Thierry Henry, former coach, like he gets the game. And as he got more comfortable in front of the camera, he did more of that as well. And then obviously forms a really good partnership with those two other guys for the Paramount coverage of the Champions League and the Europa League. But I think Zlatan could be doing that. Although personally, I want him to focus more on running my club
Oh,
because
that's right.
that's
He has a
what his
job
job's
already.
supposed to be.
Yeah, he
That was
sucks at
super
that.
frustrating.
Totally sucks at that. Finally, our last award here is most of the planet killed, and that goes to Gianni Infantino because he flew about 25 times a week across an entire continent. This fucking idiot. Finally, we're gonna do a re-ranking of the teams here, and I've put down my rankings, and you're gonna have to audit me as we go.
Yeah. Are we going bottom up?
I'm gonna go bottom up. I actually wish I hadn't put this in here, so you'd have to not know what was coming, but I kind of fucked this up. Sorry, guys. All right, 48 Qatar, 47 Tunisia,
Already disagree with you. You gotta
46
put Tunisia.
Curacao. Let's talk about it.
Gotta put Tunisia
Tunis.
last.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. That's my
Fine.
big issue there.
All right, done.
Yeah. Cool.
Tunisia 48, Qatar 47, 46 Curacao. How about that?
I think
Okay.
that's the right bottom three. Yeah.
Now we have a little Asian section. 45 Jordan, 44 Iraq, 43 Uzbekistan.
Yeah, I think you could argue probably back and forth about Iraq versus Jordan, who was worse, but this is the right group of three.
Yeah. Panama in 42nd, Saudi
Mhm.
Arabia in 41st, and New Zealand in 40th.
Yeah, again, I feel like you could probably make some arguments on small changes on this, but these teams are on the right spot.
Now we might get a little controversial here because I have Czechia 39 behind Haiti in 38. And this is
Ooh.
solely based on performance at the tournament. I just thought Haiti looked like a way more competent advanced team than we were expecting, and Czechia were so blunt and ugly, and I just don't think are the like a World Cup quality team from the European section. Do I have them too low though?
Um, I mean, you might, but I also I get what you're saying, right? Like Czechia looked really bad, and Haiti, to be
They
fair,
showed me nothing.
had a pretty tough group, and a -6
Really
total I
tough
think
group.
isn't good, but it's not bad when you're playing Brazil, Morocco, and Scotland. So I don't have any issues with you putting Haiti above Czechia.
Cool. 37 South Korea, and then we have our
Mhm.
first team that actually qualified into out of the group stage here in 36, which is South Africa, and then 35 Ghana.
Yeah, so
Because I
this is
just
why
don't.
I think it's fair to have Czechia so low because South Korea and South
Yeah,
Africa were also really disappointing. Well, South Korea was really disappointing. South Africa, I think, about what we expected. But
yeah.
yeah, Czechia should have had an easier go of it and still looked pretty rough.
There has to be some balance with the eye test versus results, and
Hmm.
it's hard. It's debatable where you come down on these, but now it starts getting a little messy in this section. Tricky. I have
Yeah.
Australia in 34, Scotland in 33, and my reasoning here was like I put Australia ahead of Scotland initially, and then I was like I don't think they would beat them in a game. So just even based on what we saw in the tournament, so I flopped them again. But maybe that's where it gets kind of like semantics and
Yeah,
opinions.
this is where just power ranking things is tough because Australia are not a great team. They're not
No.
particularly strong, but I think they looked better than Scotland for most of the tournament. But also, like we said before, Scotland had to play Brazil and Morocco. Like that's
And
tough.
they
So
underperformed, yeah.
yeah. So
Right above there, I have Bosnia and Herzegovina, 32nd.
mhm.
31st, I have Iran. 30th, I have Algeria. And then, maybe controversially, two teams that bowed out embarrassingly in
Oh,
Uruguay and Turkey, 29-28. Are they too
can
high?
we
Should I
go?
move them?
Can we go back to our biggest disappointment superlative? Because
Hmm.
I forgot
Yeah.
about Uruguay and Turkey being so poor. I'd
Yeah, they
I'd drop
sucked.
both. I'd at least drop Uruguay. Turkey saved themselves a little bit against the
Yeah, but
U.S. and at
did
least
they
they're like
really, though?
Turkey also had the most shots without a goal in World Cup history
Yeah,
in
but they're
two
all
separate
from
games.
distance. They were all from distance. None
Yeah,
of them really. I mean, Beach had a great game the first game, but the second game, again, I never really feel like they challenged Paraguay, even with 10 men. And they were playing against 10. I
yeah.
don't, you're all right. You've convinced me. How far back should I move them?
I would honestly, I'd drop Uruguay maybe behind Scotland or Australia. And I think you can drop Turkey probably not as far, but maybe behind like Iran. Because I think that Turkey at least showed some positives, whereas I don't think you can take anything positive away from Uruguay.
Okay. Uruguay is now 34th. Turkey
Okay.
is now 30th, which
Yeah.
leaves Iran in 29th, Algeria in 28th, and Paraguay in 27th.
All right. I think that's
Is
fair.
that fair? All
Yeah.
right. Canada in 26th,
Hmm.
Sweden in 25th.
Yeah. Shouldn't have been there, but once they got there, I think they were decent.
They are one of the 30
They're-
best teams in the world.
Yeah, they're a solid team. They just had a terrible qualifiers.
Ecuador in 24th.
Hmm.
Pretty big drop from where we had him. No, not pretty big drop. Maybe like 8 spots or something where I originally had him ranked.
Okay.
Senegal in 23, one of the bigger
Mhm.
drops.
Yeah,
Still could argue that should be lower based on
you
how
could.
bad they were.
You could.
Austria in 22nd, I think was overall pretty. I think we had left positive impressions, right?
Yeah, and then ran into the buzzsaw of Spain in the first
Right.
knockout round. They were not. I think 22 is right because they weren't competitive against the actual top team.
And now we have a couplet here where three of my biggest movers, I think my three biggest movers are all African teams. So we
Hmm.
have DR Congo in 21st and
Okay.
Cabo Verde in 20th.
Yeah,
What do you think about that?
deserved
It
big jumps for
seems
those
weird
teams.
to see on the list, but I think if you go back and watch those games, like the quality they displayed is they played better than the teams I have listed beneath them.
Yeah, I think in
Right?
hindsight,
Fair?
our yes, I think in hindsight, when we were looking at Congo before this tournament, we were being unfair in where we
Well,
ranked
they didn't
them.
have a great qualifying. They didn't have the
Yeah.
results to like suggest it, to be fair.
Hmm. I think
I mean,
Cabo
maybe we
Verde.
underestimated the strength of the roster, though. Cabo Verde,
Yeah,
how could you have
that's
known?
what I mean. Yeah, you
Yeah.
couldn't expect that, but a great performance from them. I think those are the right spots.
Japan in 19th,
Hmm.
the United States in 18th. They would have been
Yeah.
much higher had they not humiliated themselves against Belgium.
If it was even a competitive game, I think we're talking
Yeah.
about a team maybe in the top 16 based on performances.
Yes.
But yeah,
Instead, they dropped to 18th, which is probably around where they were. I had maybe a couple spots lower than that pre-tournament.
mhm,
Egypt in 17th, who
yeah,
moved a lot for me in between the group stage and the time they were eliminated to Argentina in the round of 16.
yeah.
I thought they were kind of mediocre in the group stage and like had moments, but had other poor moments. And then I started coming around to them. So they've moved all the way up to 17th.
Okay, I think that's fair.
And then I have Mexico in 16th.
Yeah, I would have. I want to push for Mexico to be higher, but I'm not sure who I would
They're
drop
not better than
below
any,
that.
yeah, they're not better than any teams that I have in
Yeah,
the top
because
15, I don't think.
they were one of those teams that I think we always knew was going to overperform their talent at this World Cup because they are so good at home. It's only their third ever loss at Stadio Azteca was the England game.
Yeah. They don't play a lot of teams from Europe in the
No.
Azteca, but not to be a douche, but yeah. They're mostly beating Honduras in there. Ivory Coast in 15th,
Mhm.
who I just thought kind of got a raw deal with the Norway game, and I would have loved to see them play somebody like and be able to advance further than that because I thought they were like legitimately good, and
Yeah.
I'm excited to keep watching this version of the team.
Yeah.
Croatia up at 14th, who sort of rescued my opinion of them on that in that Portugal game, which they were kind of screwed, frankly, and super unlucky to lose.
Mhm.
They had a really weird group stage where they looked kind of bad, and then
Yeah.
reminded us of their quality at the final hurdle there. So kind of neutral.
Mhm. No, I think that's fair.
Speaking of Switzerland and in 13th, who did make the quarterfinals, and but I no point was I, as usual with Switzerland, am I ever sold that they're like particularly elite at anything except defending. So
Yeah, it would have been nice too to see with Monzambi from more of the knockout stages if they
yeah, a
could,
bit of a shame.
cause some problems. But yeah, I mean that's we're power ranking them based off their World Cup performance. So I think this is a good spot.
Yeah, Belgium in 12th, which pains me because I think they're worse than that, but they did make the quarterfinal and decimate the United States. So what are you gonna do? They had the weakest group in the tournament and were so lucky to beat Senegal. Shouldn't have. Senegal had them in the palms of their hands, and then kind of took advantage of a unique motivation situation with the U.S. and were brilliant in that game, and were did enough to hang out in there with Spain. So, very confusing tournament. Now, David, it gets interesting because I have Germany in 11th and the Netherlands in 10th.
I think you got to drop Germany. I
You
think
think? How
outside
far?
the Curacao honestly, I think Germany could be behind Mexico.
I'm not putting them that far. I'll put them behind Switzerland.
Okay. I think outside Curacao game, I mean, you have a good performance against Ivory Coast. So I guess it's fair to say they should be ahead of them. But they did not look particularly strong against Ecuador, and then obviously really struggled against Paraguay. They just couldn't break down defensive teams, I think is kind of the big
I think they're
weakness
better.
in that
So
sense.
yeah, Switzerland could beat them for in that way. I think they're better than Switzerland and Belgium still. But
Mm-hmm.
I hear you on the how they
I think we have
performed.
to
So
give
I'll
the
drop.
actual performance some credence
Yeah,
here.
okay.
Yeah.
13th for Germany.
Yeah.
Now the Dutch in 10th. Any arguments there?
I think there's arguments just off the back that Switzerland made the quarterfinals and the Dutch went out in the round of 32, but they go
Hmm.
out to a very
So
strong
did
Morocco
Belgium.
side. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think you
but
could
Belgium
probably,
aren't better than them.
yeah. I think the Dutch overall looked much better than Germany, and like their group stage performance was, consistently good. Smacked Sweden around.
Yeah,
Tunisia game
my
was
thing with them is that I feel like they were so damaged by like individual coaching decisions in that Morocco game that I almost feel like they were robbed of the chance. Maybe that's too homer a take of me, but I feel like especially when you watch Morocco's next two performances after that, I can't help but wonder if they had a lot more to give than that. But I'm
yeah.
speculating and being a homer, so I'm leaving them in 10th because it's my
Losing on
list. Suck
penalties
it.
to a good team is very different than losing on penalties to Paraguay. No
Yeah,
offense
and
to
again,
Paraguay, but
Belgium. Go look at the teams Belgium beat until that U.S. game too. They hadn't. They drew Iran, right?
yep.
They drew Egypt. They piled it on New Zealand, who are already kind of beaten. They had that Senegal game. They were down 2-0 in until Senegal shat the bed at the end. Like they could have easily been 27th on this list if they went out in that game. So I can't in good conscience. You know what? I'm putting Switzerland ahead of Belgium. It's happening.
Okay. I don't have. I think they're
I
pretty
just talked
similar.
myself out of Belgium. Belgium are full of shit. I'm sorry. Brazil in ninth, which is probably the lowest they've ever been on a World Cup power rankings ever.
Yeah.
That's but how can you put them higher than that?
Yeah. I don't know how you can.
Because I mean, I guess you could say Colombia's not better than them, but I think Colombia had a better tournament than they did, even though they went out in the same round. And Colombia went out to probably a weaker team, definitely a weaker team. Uh, but and Colombia had problems up top with scoring, but I think they're a more cohesive unit, so I gave them the nod out of respect for that.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think that's the right thing to do.
Portugal at seventh. I'm more thinking just remove Ronaldo and get him a better coach, and they're still and they're a contender again. Like I don't think it's necessarily that complicated with them.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I'm giving them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here because their ceiling is high still. Seven. Morocco sixth. Norway fifth. These are our two big. This seems high when you just say the names of the country next to five and six, but I think based on the performances, especially in Norway's case, who could have very well been playing in a semifinal, I don't think it's that crazy. We were
Yeah.
flirting with Norway being like a team of this echelon and not really willing to commit to it, but I think we've seen enough to say that they can compete at this level.
Absolutely. There's so much of a more well-rounded team, I think, than people gave them credit for, and the back line really performed above my expectations for this team. And obviously, Nealand was incredible from almost every game in this tournament, but
Until the
that kind of
very
took
end.
me by and that kind of took me by surprise.
Yeah, they're going to need another goalkeeper, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Number 4, I have England. Number 3, I have Argentina. Number 2, I have France. And number 1, I have Spain, which is exactly the 1 through 4 I had pre-tournament, David, in the exact order.
I think I know I had
You had
France
France
1.
first.
Did I have Spain 2? I think I can't remember if I
Yeah,
had
you
Spain or
did.
Argentina 2, but
You had Spain too.
all right, you get me
Yeah.
this World Cup, but I'm gonna be back for 2030 when I'll
Quite
rank Italy
literally,
first.
I mean, did we learn
Yeah.
anything? We learned
Yeah,
nothing.
we already knew it. Yeah.
We learned who was better between Spain and France right now, and that's it. That's all we learned.
I think that's a pretty good power ranking. There's a lot of changes, I think, around the middle of the pack where
Totally.
that's where we learned about teams and how they compared to each other. But really, just so many risers from CAF. I think is
Yeah.
kind of the
It
big
speaks a
takeaway.
little bit to the depth. Like, I think if you go from like Mexico at 16 on down to as far as like Algeria at 28, like you could see
Mhm.
any of those teams beating each other in a knockout game, you know?
Yeah, that's why I think there was an argument for there being 48 worthy teams to qualify for a World Cup. I think when
Yeah.
we go to 64, we're stretching that for sure.
I think we should cut it off at 42 or 44. You know, get Qatar and Tunisia out of here.
If you can
And
figure
one
out how to make
of
those group stages
Iraq
work,
and Jordan.
then power to you.
That's about gonna do it. Do you have any last World Cup parting things to say about our dear home World Cup?
Uh, Not too much. I think it's really just we got to give our congratulations over to Spain for one of the best
Obviously.
performances one of the best defensive performances at any World Cup ever. Also, a special shout out to Iran, who were the only other team to not lose at the World Cup.
It's the New Zealand
Yeah,
honor of drawing a few times.
yeah.
Drawing 3 times and earning 3 points. Except New Zealand in 2010 was famously the only team not to lose at the World Cup because Spain lost their first game. That did not happen this time, but they did have a similar path by drawing
Almost happened.
their worst
Yeah,
performance. Yeah. But
yeah.
in hindsight, makes a little more sense now that we know a bit more about that Cabo Verde team.
Mhm.
But like I said at the top of the show, check back in with us. We'll have a bunch of information on social media about what's coming next for Europa and Conference League stuff. We got qualifier season upon us right now. It's happening. So stay up to date with that. We'll be rejoining with full episodes in the 3rd round qualifying. And we're working on some other stuff that maybe we could share in the coming weeks. But for now, cheers to who are we cheersing to? The world?
Yeah, cheers. Cheers to the world. What was
We
the
are the world.
that they had during the Coldplay song? Was it just like World Love?
Oh
Right
yeah,
on the field? Yeah.
love. Yeah, just said love.
Well, cheers to that. Cheers to love.
Cheers to love. Cheers to the world. Cheers to we are the world. Cheers to the that little kid that designed that Pescara jersey you're wearing.
Yeah. Hold on, his name's somewhere on here. And it's Luigi. His name's Luigi.
His name is Luigi. I'm not cheersing to Luigi at the end of a podcast. It's not happening.
So that'll
You're
get
not
us
gonna catch me
demonetized
like
in the
that,
US.
David. You're not gonna catch me. You're not gonna catch me doing that. Cheers to you all. We'll see you in August.